If you want to stop creating materials that get you nowhere and start making materials like AAA professionals, then you need to learn how they do it, and the secret is not in the notes they use. In the past, I show you what you learn after 5 years of working in the industry, and today I'm gonna make a huge breakdown of every single step I take when I start creating my own materials in my whole workflow. For this, I created an easy guide to break down the professional workflow I have been using while working, but this won't be fast. We will go over the 4 different stages I work on while creating a material, and the first of them is preparing yourself. Starting a project in Substance Designer is quite scary and intimidating, especially if you're working on a project for a long period of time and you can't get things done. It feels really frustrating to try and not get any result. But professionals rarely go throughout this, and it's not because they are immune to it. They do something you are not doing, and that first step is organizing before acting. Usually, when we want to create a new material, we rush into gathering a lot of images without thinking twice, and after that, we dash to Substance Designer to start our project really fast. Now, this is what is killing your material, but not because of what you might think. A lot of these images might not be useful for you and will only distract you. However, I have some tricks I have been using as a professional in the last 5 years that will help you with this. So let's dive into the first of the 4 steps that will help you enhance your workflow when creating materials in Substance Designer. When looking for reference images, artists are quite used to just picking as much images they can about the material they want to create. And after that, as I said before, they just go directly to Substance Designer. However, this is more harmful than it looks like. You can buy a calculator, but if you don't use it in your exam, it's not gonna be any good for you. How much worth it was a calculator for you? What I'm trying to say here is that it is not about the images you gather, it's about how you use them. Many people just gather reference images, have them in the pure ref in their screen, and that's all of it. They don't do anything else. They just look at it and that's it. They don't analyze these images, they don't use it, and that many times harms you way more than you think. So let's get to pure ref to see exactly what I do and how you organize your reference gathering for your research. So first, let's give a shout out to Sang Wei-jun, who is an artist that has created this material that we are going to use as a reference today. Now, usually you don't use a 3D material as a reference, but they wanted to have something that was really clear about what we're gonna do. When you want to start creating a material, you would usually have a main reference image. In this case, we're going to use this as our main reference image. When you do this, what you need to do first, and this is the first step, is break down your material. So the first part is breaking down what you do. Yes, so we're gonna do a breakdown. So the breakdown here would be, what kind of surfaces do I have in this material? Do I have more than one? And what are the things I'm gonna be looking for? So the first thing would be, in here we have 2 kinds of materials. We have stones, and we also have what it's called kind of like mortar. Yeah, so we're gonna do an MOR, just like mortar. So we have 2 kinds of surfaces, and we're gonna have to look images in both of these. So when you do your reference gathering process, this is the first step you have to do. You need to break down your reference into 2 or 3 simple steps, depending how many parts of your material have. If this would have binds on top, then we will have a third part that would be foliage. And for each of these parts, we have to look the references. Now that we know this, let's go down here and let's see how we can do a breakdown of these into reference images and gathering. So you're going to start your reference gathering organization by doing the breakdown, yes, and this breakdown told you that you have 2 different surfaces, stones, yes, and mortar. We're going to do S&M for each of them. Now, each of these ones are going to have their own individual section for reference gathering, and we're going to focus in 2 things. We're going to focus in shape, surface detail, color, and pattern. And for our mortar, we are pretty much going to do the same. For our mortar, we're going to focus on shape, surface detail, but what we're going to do now is we're going to stop there, maybe add color, yes. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to sectionize. So the first step was breaking down. So first, we break down things. The second step is going to be sectionize. Yes, you need to sectionize what you're doing. Why do we want to sectionize? When we create sections in our head, or let's say in something we are gathering, we are more specific about what we are looking for. So in this case, when we're talking about shapes in rocks, we might look for some images that are really nice when showing how how our shapes look from far away, and we are not looking for something that show us so much surface detail. That way, when we start to get our images inside the pure ref, what happens is that you end having different sections where you focus on something specific. When you focus on something specific, you are way better at it than if you're trying to do everything at the same time. So usually people will try to do all of this together. In my case, if you make this by their own place, you're gonna have a way better result than if you don't. So once you have this section, you need to look the reference images for each of these materials. Now, the big question, where are we going to look for these images? So we're gonna look for these images in two places, and it's gonna really depend on what we are looking for. So the first place where we're gonna look for is Pinterest. The reason we're going to look in Pinterest is because we want quality images about different shapes. So what's the difference between a quality image and a resolution image? A quality image is an image that is gonna help me go in the direction I want to go, while a resolution image is just gonna be an image that will have a lot of pixels in it and you can zoom in. Let's give you an example. If I wanted to look for an image like this image here will actually help me a lot. This is a quality image. A quality image means that when I see this here, it's gonna take me with information I need. Maybe if I zoom in, this is gonna just be blurred. But if I go to the basics of what I want to do as a designer, in here I can see several things. I can see the big shapes I need to create in order to get this. I can see that there's a lot of inner steps. I can see the actual shape of this. I can see how this pattern goes. Yes, I can also see coloring here, despite it's not super clear about it. We can see color. So this has a lot of information that I can use for this kind of material. Now, when we talk about resolution, we talk about things like, for example, that you have here. So if here I go for a stone wall, what I'm gonna find is a lot of images that have a lot of details. Now, so Unsplash, what it's going to give you is a lot of really high resolution images with a little bit of an artistic touch. And you might find a lot of things in here, but there's some that you might have to look in another website that is called Pexels. It's quite similar to Unsplash, but they have a little bit more of images. So let's say, for example, let's try to divide this into another section. Let's say we wanted to work with an image like this. Let's try to do something like this. So I'm going to copy this image and bring it to my PDF. Let's say I'm working in my section of shape creation. Yeah. So I'm going to be building shapes. If this is going to be in my shape creation, what I do is I come here and I create a node and I name this. This is going to be shape. So if I want to do this material, I'm going to focus on this in shape, and I can also do here pattern, which is actually quite useful in this case. So now we are going to go to first step, and the first step in all of this is, once we have gathered all our images, what you're going to do is you're going to get each of these images and sections, and you're going to analyze this. Now the big question is, how do you analyze an image like this? Now, in order to analyze an image like this, what we need to do is actually go down to it and draw over it. So let's take as an example what I have already gotten here, this image. So the actual image here is for shape and pattern. So how can I actually get into this and analyze this? So the first thing I can do, yes, is, for example, if I'm going for shape, I can draw around the shape of these rocks to actually identify how they look. See? And trying to see, do I have short corners, short and straight corners that are sharp, or do I have more kind of like around edge shape? Do I have variations in the edges, or do I have just a flat surface? Yeah, these kinds of things are the ones that are going to help you later identify what you need to do, because when you're going to look back to your reference images, for example, while you're working in Substance Designer like this, you're going to see the drawings and you're going to focus on the drawings and say, okay, so this is pretty much how it looks, and it's not that strong as I'm making this. This is a really great way of kind of like limiting yourself when you're working in Substance Designer and you're applying sculpting to your edges and shapes. This is going to allow you to actually see that what you're doing, it's too strong, so you're going to lower even more the details. Same happens with the bricks here. If I go throughout the bricks here, I can see all the details. If I follow this here, yes, and I can do something like this. Sorry, I pressed shift there. I can go with something like this, for example. And this is not only showing us the edge details, it's also showing us the orientation of the bricks. Here we can see our brick has this kind of orientation, and this one has another kind of orientation that is a little bit kind of like inclined. And with all of this, we get the patterns. As you can see here, we have a line of stones, a line of bricks, a line of stones, a line of bricks. And we can also see is that the mortar, it's only in here. So from one image, we got information, a lot of information that usually you might have gone over it if you didn't do this. Now I'm doing this with one image. You need to do this with all of your images that you have gathered for each of these sections. And this takes me to another part. So we are going to go a little bit back to the sectionized part. You don't need 10 to 20 images per section. You just need one good picture. Look with what they did with just one picture. I took the shape. In here in this picture, it's a super high quality image. Why? I got pattern, shape, color, and I got even a little bit of surface detail, but that's not quite enough for what I want. I can see edge valuation in this image. I can see a little bit more of how roughness works in here. I have a lot of base color details. Yes, look at all of this. This is a lot of base color details. So this image is actually quite useful for me. The thing is that if I don't break this image down, I will never know about it. So now that we have our first step done, which is analyzing our material, we need to go to our fourth step. And the fourth step might be the longest of them all. And I'm gonna show you right now. So after you do the analyze section, what you want to do is you want to organize. What do I mean with organize? Because so far that looks like it's everything we have been doing, you know, like I've been organizing my images, I've been sectioning them, but what do I need to organize? And what you need to organize is what's going in here so that you can take it to Substance Designer. So how do we do this? What we are going to do is we're going to make the thought process of working in Substance Designer. That means that we are going to create an order for these things. Let's take, for example, I want to create this material here. Yeah. So I'm going to do my organize section. Yes. Here. So this section, what is going to allow me is to think before jumping into Designer how I want to do it in Substance Designer. So let's say I open Substance Designer. That would be my first step. Now my next step is going to be the stones. So I'm going to write here stones, and as I start with my stones, I need to start working on something. So what I'm going to be working first. So first I'm going to be working on shapes. This is the first thing I'm going to be working. I'm going to be working on shapes. Yes. And what things can I work about shapes? Because there's a lot of things to work in here. So for stones, I could work big shapes. I can work small shapes. I can even work pattern here. In fact, I'm going to have to work with the pattern on it. So something super important I didn't mention here is that depending what kind of material you're going to be working on, this is going to vary a lot. So this kind of walls, you would kind of do it pretty much all in one procedural setup, where you get a tiling and you also get different shapes of your rocks. So after getting into this, you're also, maybe let's add here tiling. When we're talking about shapes in this particular case, we're talking also about tiling because that's how this one will be made. And now that you have this, many people do the following. Many people go directly and do surface detail after they achieve shapes. No, that's not what you're gonna do. When you're working on shapes, before going to the next step, you're gonna also have to do some edge detail. So you need to do some edge sculpting to this, because shape is not only about is it big, smaller, which direction does it have. You know, the more detail you are in this step about what you want to do, the better it's gonna be for you, because you're not gonna get lost in the future. But we're gonna talk about that later, not now. So we're in shape. We create our tiling, our base, our big shapes, our small shapes, and our edge text. So now people will go directly into surface detail, but in my case, it won't be like that. What I'm going to do is start with my mortar. Yes, I'm gonna go straight to my mortar and I'm gonna create the shape of my mortar. Why am I doing this? Why did I overstep the edge, the surface detail in this case? In here, I told you to sectionize things. It is better for you to work one thing at a time rather than doing all together in one single piece. That is what we're doing here. A material is a composition of different elements that together form something beautiful. The first thing you should do is try to find a really nice composition for your shape and material blending before actually starting to add noise or details on top that are going to distract you from your actual material. Many times you have seen the clay material or the clay render, like the one that you're watching right now on screen. This material doesn't have base color, so you don't have to get distracted by the base color and see the actual beauty of the material without it in the shape, normal, and height map of this material. Now, shout out to one of my students in the mentorship program who made this amazing material. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're working the shape first. We're working the shape of our stones, the shape of our mortar. Yes, in here, you're gonna have to kind of like apply all of this into this section as well. Yeah, so pretty much it's gonna be the same. And after you got your shapes for your mortar and your stones, then what would you do? Well, in my case, I would blend them. I want to blend them because I want to see how they will react together, how they will work together, if they feel organic. So I'm gonna blend them. And this is pretty much straightforward in Substance Designer, just a height blend node and you can go forward with it. Now, after this, we want to go back to our stones. Yeah, so we're gonna use an S for my stones, and we're gonna go back to our surface details now. Well, not back, but start with them, surface details. Now, it's really hard to actually make a breakdown in the surface details if you don't have with the specific images, but in these kinds of cases it's really great if you can actually do that. Like for example, I'm gonna use these stones as a reference, and what I'm gonna start to make is I'm gonna start to analyze. So first I see that there are holes and small cracks in here, so I'm just gonna add in here H for holes. Yes, this is gonna be one of our first surface details that we're gonna be doing. Then we're gonna do small cracks. Yes, this is another one, and we're gonna keep doing this. I mean, the idea for this is to again organize your ideas in your head. Have some what else can we have in here, because I really like this image. So they also have some stone grain, so let's just go like that. We have stone grain, cracks, and holes. Yes, so all of these are the things that we are going to be working in our surface detail, and it should be enough for now. This is just an example. So basically these are going to be the free surface details, and the reason we're doing this is to moderate ourselves. When it comes around making surface detail, a lot of people do the following: they just go in there and drop a lot of surface noises, like they look for branch maps, they directional warp them, they just try to get a lot of detail in there, and that's just way too much, man. Hold up, take a breath, look to reference, see what's going on. This is for that. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to put a limit to the things we're going to do so we don't go overboard and ruin our material. So now that our stones have the surface detail, we're going to do exactly the same with our mortar. Yes, we're going to go for our mortar and we're going to do surface detail. Yeah, and of course it's not going to be exactly the same as in our stones, but I'm not gonna do this part because it's pretty much the same, and I want you to make an example out of it. Now that we have all of this, we can finally go to the base color, isn't it? Well, no, we are actually gonna go for a render. Yes, in fact, let me just do this another way. We're gonna go for a quick render. Why? Some minutes ago I showed you one of the renders of my students during their mentorship program. The reason they did those renders was not just to showcase how good they were, it was to check that everything they had built so far worked together. Making a quick render in the place where you're gonna see the material, it's super useful. Why? Substance Designer has their own render system. Yes, they have their own render, but it's not the same as, for example, Marmoset or Unreal Engine. Each of these different rendering software and game engines have their own way of rendering materials, and of course between them it's also different. Yes, so Substance Designer will show you something in particular in their 3D viewport that is going to be completely different to Marmoset. And let's get this for example. The 3D rendering screen of Substance Designer doesn't have ray tracing, but Marmoset does. The displacement works different. The count poly on your plane is going to be different because you're going to be able to actually choose that. So there's a lot of factors that are working on or going in the background that are actually changing the result of what you see. So my best advice is to, once you have done everything that is related to height, normal, and AO, go and do a quick render. Check how everything feels. How is the material blending? How is the noise blending? Is it way too much? Do I have too much noise in my stones than in my mortar? Does the mortar take too much of my stone pattern and it kind of like breaks the combination of these two? This quick render is going to really help you get all of that. Now let's move to the next part, that now that we have the quick render, it's going to be our base color. Now our base color is gonna be divided in different parts. First, we need to add individual colors, and in this case it's gonna be all a linear process. So first I'm gonna do individual colors for stones. Yeah, so we're gonna start, in fact let me just fix this. So from the base color we're gonna go first with our stones, and what we're gonna do is uniform color first. Uniform color in my case would be assigning a uniform color to our stones. Yeah, there's different ways of doing it, and I'm going to show you in another video. So assigning uniform color, then we're going to add color variation. Then from here we're going to add, for example, noise color. Yes, we're going to use different noise to add color. Then we're going to add, for example, if we go here in our images, we have this is the weather color. Yes, or the, let's say, the mortar color. Yeah, so I'm gonna add some mortar color dust on top of my stones to kind of signature that while this wall was being built, some of that mortar that was being put fell on top of the stones and make a detail. And we're going to do exactly the same with our mortar. Now, the thing with this part, with the base color, is that the base color I do feel is a little bit more artistic. So for this case, I usually don't go so much into details in here. I try to go over some of the things I always do and kind of like repeating these. Like some of the most important rules I have for when working with color is that the base color needs to follow our shape of the material. Why? In real life, color is not just applied anywhere like that. It follows the surface and the shape of the surface. If you look in stones, most of the things do have color, but they are following the shape. So making a base color based on all the details we have created here is just natural. These are some of the things I usually do. Yes, adding first uniform color to each of my stones, then adding color variation and keep on going like that. But it really depends on my artistic representation. Another thing I wanted to tell you before closing this video is that many people tend to just follow what they see in the reference images, and they are losing the fun part of actually being an artist, which is being creative. You can do a lot of things with these, and many of these things will be actually useful for you if you let yourself go from reference at the end of this, so you can make also your own version. Keep it realistic to what you're trying to do, but also be a little bit creative. Blend colors, tell a story. Let's, for example, you don't see here like a grain or anything, but maybe you could do some ponds going down of water. Yeah, so this area would have more kind of like big roughness that is going to be reflecting more light because it's kind of like, okay, this is wet. Yes, so also color which is going to be darker. Yes, so try adding details to all of these things, and you're going to be able to tell a specific story. And the more the story looks interesting, the more people is going to like it. Now, after the base color, it comes the final stage, which is roughness. And my roughness creation, as many of you may know, it's a little bit more simple than you may think. My roughness creation comes from actually my base color. So I get my base color, transform it to grayscale, use a histogram scan to control that, and that's what I'm going to do in my roughness. After my roughness is complete, my base color as well, I start with my final renders actually. So let's just do something like this. My final renders is going to be pretty much what I'm going to be working for the next 2 weeks after I finish doing my whole material. Working on a material in Substance Designer, it's really messy if you don't know what you're doing. What I have shown you here might not be the most fun thing to do, but it's something you need to start doing. You need to organize your ideas in your head before actually jumping to start and do something new. If you don't know what you're going to do in the future, then you're just going to get lost. Many people happened that they're working on a specific project and maybe they got to the part where they created the shapes of the stones and then they want to create the surface detail, but they get lost when they introduce the mortar because they don't match. And of course they're not gonna match because one part is way more ahead than the other one, and they don't know why that is happening. So they start touching things, they start adding things to try to look for a solution. And what ends up happening is that they destroyed everything they had been working on. And all the hours and days and weeks they have put into it just go down the drain. I don't think like doing something like this, it's really that bad. If you want to save time for yourself and if you want to create these kind of textures. These kind of textures take a lot of time and work, and that is the #1 reason professionals are able to do it compared to maybe what you are doing for your own artistic projects. I know this might sound hard, but if you really want to grow into creating super realistic, crazy materials like the ones I do and I have in my portfolio in ArtStation, then this is the amount of work and the kind of mentality that it takes. This is something I do every single time I start a new material in Substance Designer. Does it take me time? Yes, it takes me time to do this, but again, it's gonna save me time in the future and I'm gonna be more straightforward. If you want another example of this, think about this like a journey. If you start a journey in point A and you don't have a point B to go, you're just gonna go around, wander around, trying to find a way where to go and end up in the same place because you're gonna get tired and you're gonna go to throw everything. So what is gonna happen is that you're gonna end up in the same place again. But if you have a point A to point B, the journey is way straightforward. But this doesn't mean that the journey is just going to be aligned. It's going to again be something like this, because sometimes maybe you might do a wrong turn and you're getting away from your target, and you might go again and get lost and get closer, then again a wrong turn, and you might end up in the same place again. So having a plan on how you want to do this and having, for example, a stop here to check something, then moving here, having another stop, yes, moving here, having different organizations of where you want to go, it's gonna make the journey way easier compared to what we were drawing before. So Please take your time to organize your reference images, analyze everything you do, and you will be able to have a better time working on Substance Designer. But for that, you're still gonna need to know how to use the software and how to apply everything we have just said into creating a material. If you want to see the next part, please let me know in the comments, and I'll be sure to create the next chapter where we are gonna drop into Substance Designer and create a full material. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Saturday.